Hi, I'm Jeanne Brako, a friend of Acequia Madre House. We're here at Acequia Madre House in Santa Fe, New Mexico to speak with Cheri Falkenstein Doyle, who is a curator, author, and the lead researcher on the Acequia Madre House Legacy Project. Acequia Madre House is a 5-acre property in Santa Fe, New Mexico, in the heart of the historic district. It's home to WISC, the Women's International Study Center. If you'd like to hear more about WISC, please go to women'sinternationalstudycenter.com to see interviews and other content. Cheri has spent her career between Pasadena, California and Santa Fe, New Mexico. She had a professional appointment at the Southwest Museum in California, and the Southwest Museum ties to the Feñez Curtin Palahamo story here in Santa Fe. Following that, she was at the Wheelwright Museum as curator for 22 years. And that's part of the story of women in Santa Fe. So Cheri, it's good to be here with you.
It's good to be here with you too.
We're going to talk about the Feñez Curtin Palahamo family. So the women who lived here, tell us about the 3 women who lived in Acequia Madre House.
Well, Ava Scott Feñez is the mother. Leonora Curtin is her daughter. And Mrs. Palahamo, who was also Leonora, but called Babs, or Babsy, was Leonora's daughter. So there were 3 generations of women who occupied this house at different times. Ava first came to Santa Fe in 1890, basically to get a divorce, because I think Santa Fe was one of the places in the West where women could come and get a divorce. And she built a house up on Hillside, north of the plaza, which is no longer there. I've actually gone to look and I can't figure out exactly where it was. And I think that was, in fact, to sort of establish residency here, okay? Leonora, I think, was about 7 or so at the time. I mean, so she had a daughter. Ultimately, they went, back to Pasadena, where the Feñez mansion is, which is now the Pasadena Historical Society, and they lived there. That was kind of their permanent home. But eventually, Leonora decided to build a house here. What happened was that she was widowed rather early. Her husband, Tom, died in, I think, 1910. And she never remarried. She was on her own with a young child. Her daughter, Babs, was about 7 or so, I think. And I think she was just looking for a peaceful, a nice place that she could sort of call her own, away from, being sort of in her mother's house forever, kind of. Mm-hmm. So she built this house in 1927. A lot of the times, or the story that I've heard is that they actually, in the designing and building of the house, they fired a whole bunch of architects, and then decided to do it themselves. And I don't sort of feel like that's exactly what happened when you kind of go through the records. I think they were just, they kind of just wanted to do it their own way. And I think there were architects who submitted plans, that they had sort of contacted to submit plans. None of them were quite what they wanted. So they hired a contractor named Campbell, who was a local guy, and they just started kind of thinking it through themselves, and that's how the house came to be what it is now.
Was that typical of women of the time? Do you see them as women of their time to do something on their own like this?
I don't really know. I mean, I haven't looked at it that way. I think Santa Fe at that point was a place where if you were a woman of that type, you could sort of come and live your own life. I mean, I think there weren't a lot of restrictions. And maybe Pasadena was not quite that way. I'm not sure.
Sort of more established, more formal.
Yeah.
Just like the Pasadena house and the mansion is a much more formal residence than here.
And they never completely left California either. I mean, they went back and forth between California and Santa Fe.
You and I met at the Southwest Museum, and we reviewed all those beautiful textiles and that wonderful collection. And Charles Lummis, who was the founding director of the Southwest Museum, was a player here in Santa Fe and also comes up in the guest books and logs at the Acequia Madre House. Can you tell us a little bit about Charles Lummis and the relationship or influence?
Well, they certainly knew each other. Lummis lived kind of in the Arroyo area near Pasadena. So, I mean, they had the Pasadena connection, and then they also had the Santa Fe collection. He was the one who dubbed them the Three Wise Women. That was his nickname for them. Okay. At Lummis's behest, Ava did a series of watercolor paintings of kind of the remaining adobes in Southern California that were, essentially, being lost. And so it was kind of a preservation project, but she did these really lovely watercolors of adobes, and that was something that Lummis, got her to do. So they did know each other. And Eve Lummis, who was Lummis's wife, was also a friend.
So more opportunities for research into the circle and the influences that are there.
That part of it's really interesting, yeah.
And Mrs. Leonora Curtin, she also, so I think of always Eva Feñas, she was the artist and watercolorist, right. And Leonora Curtin, she also had her own profession. She worked in researching, was it basketry or fiber or? She
became interested in ethnobotany, so by the Prophet of the Earth, which is Native American sort of ethnobotany, healing herbs of the Upper Rio Grande, which is more, sort of New Mexican, Hispanic, Spanish ethnobotany.
I did bring her book, so it is sort of, in some ways, of its time, but it is an interesting book. And her earlier book was, the title is?
Healing Herbs of the Upper Rio Grande.
That's a very interesting book because it's one of the important ethnobotany studies that was done at that time and in this area. So these were very, not only sort of influential women in their community, but also experts and professionals in their own right.
Yeah, they were accomplished. And I think with Leonora, I think part of it was after her husband passed away, she just really started getting interested in, really establishing her own life. I mean, I think, and when you read kind of early letters between her and Tom Curtin, who eventually she marries, there's something really girlish about her, and he kind of has to, chide her a little bit about not writing enough or just writing silly gossip, or, there's this kind of dynamic there that I found a little uncomfortable because I thought he was kind of just schooling her, But at the same time, once he's gone, she really starts to come into her own. And I think part of it too is getting out from under her mother's influence. I mean, I think she just has to establish her own life. And I really think that's a big part of what the house is about. Her coming out here. She's familiar with Santa Fe already because they've been coming out here for a long time, but just to have a place that's really hers, where she can raise her daughter as she'd like to raise her daughter, Ava, was kind of a real estate maven. I mean, that was kind of her thing, was buying and selling real estate. And Leonora got into that a little bit too. But I think ultimately that wasn't what she really wanted to pursue, It's
really interesting to me because this house is so wonderfully full of archives and collections and photos and memories and even recordings. So here you have sort of a setting that tells the lives of three women from different generations who were all here in Santa Fe. And there's so many different stories to tell because the archives are enormous. So
there's close to 800 boxes.
800 boxes of archival material plus the artifact collections in the house. So I know we're going to hear more stories and more information and see more things. You know, as everyone really starts to understand the materials, they've been collated now, they've been collected, and some of them are online and available to the public. One of the things I wanted to share with Cheri was I've been working on the artifact collections, and we keep finding really interesting artifacts here. And I'm going to show you something we found yesterday. This was supposedly in the bottom drawer of Leonora Curtin's desk, but I don't know, maybe you have an idea of who this might have belonged to. We have a number of things in here. We have a canister of tobacco, beautiful little Art Deco canister. And then what I want to show you is here, let's get this box, let me get this back. So here in the Whitman's White Cap Mint box, we have a secret stash of Lucky Strike. So these women, they had their wonderful circle, they had all their silverware and china, all the right accoutrements, but they were out of the box women, weren't they?
They were, but I can't imagine who in that family thought it would be necessary to hide the Lucky Strikes. I think they would have been just, you know, you don't like it, deal with it. I don't know.
One of the first things Cheri told me about the women in this house was she had seen a film at the Folk Art Museum, I think, and they were puffing away in the background there on their cigarettes, maybe in their fancy cigarette holders. So there are still wonderful things to explore and stories to find here.
Well, the thing about this archive it's from the standpoint of the way archives are normally run, it's not a good thing, but from my standpoint, it's a great thing. Nobody ever threw away a piece of paper. So there is just endless ephemera and funny little things that you find, and matchbooks and shopping lists, guest lists for parties. And Leonora Sr. would write drafts of letters and guest lists on things on any piece of scratch paper that, you know, she happened to have on hand. So you've got this teeny little pencil writing with, you know, all of these lists of names of people, like, wow, she knew them. You know, it's like
they had a big circle. So I keep thinking, in today's world, if these women were alive now, how do you think they'd be handling COVID with masks and social distancing and stay-at-home orders? What do you think they would be doing?
I think they would just deal. I mean, they were pretty resourceful and pretty pragmatic. I mean, they were, you know, they enjoyed their freedom, you know, but they were really intelligent people. And I think they would figure out ways to kind of, you know, go forward.
And I keep imagining them because, you know, I've seen they made some of their own sort of accoutrements for the house, and they were all sewers. And I imagine them making their own masks and throwing a big party out here on the lawn with social distancing.
They would do that with lots of bootleg liquor.
Lots of bootleg liquor.
But they wouldn't have to have, if they were still here, they wouldn't have to have that because Connie's is up the street.
And they could go there. So I want to thank you, Cheri, for doing this interview. I know we'll hear more stories. We're looking forward to the book. But before then, you'll be seeing more videos and more aspects of their life presented here, also online. So thank you, Cheri. And
well, thank you, Jeanne.
Enjoyed it. Till next time.